Hey everyone, welcome back to Care Fiction. I'm your host Subhankar. Here we are again with another book review, and this time we are sliding into the science fiction category. And to kick it off, we are starting with Recursion by Blake Crouch. Before we begin, if you are new to this channel, do consider subscribing. And if you are a returning subscriber, it's great to have you back. Blake Crouch has a host of novels under his belt. The most notable ones are his two major sci-fi works, Dark Matter and Wayward Pines. I haven't read Dark Matter yet, but I have heard very good things about it. I have seen the TV adaptation of Wayward Pines and it is really good. Honestly, I picked this book solely because of its reviews and more specifically its ratings. The majority of the readers have voted it 4 or 5 on a scale of 5. And thus, I had an inexplicable instinct to get this book, although I didn't look at the written reviews, because some of these could be, as you know, spoilery. But I can assure you that this video will be 100% spoiler free. So let me begin my review by saying that I have mixed feelings about this book. And why do I say this? Well, let's find out. Beginning with the plot, the book deals with memories, and referencing to the summary at the back, it deals with revisiting certain memories and rewriting the life events. So it deals with alternate timelines, and needless to say, although a huge spoiler, that it involves time travel. And I think that is enough to make you stop whatever you're doing right now and go grab this book. Or at least that might have happened with me. Also, the plot is advanced through two central characters, Barry Sutton, an NYPD detective, and Helena Smith, a neuroscientist. From a story and concept point of view, I love the idea of memory and time travel, and I think it's very novel and authentic. So based around this idea, there are several plot lines which can be very confusing at certain times, and honestly, a handful of them felt really unnecessary. For instance, this memory technology is used to alter certain past events, and while it feels fitting for the plot, but that does not provide any narrative value to the concept of alternate timeline. And at certain times, the plot feels very repetitive, which should be obvious given that there is time travel involved, but that totally downplays the idea of memory and time travel, as that exists solely for plot advancement purposes. Coming to the narrative style, let's be clear on one thing. It is not a literary science fiction novel. For instance, A Brave New World, the works of Arthur C. Clarke and George Orwell. It follows a highly plot-driven narrative, and to say that it has a non-linear narrative would really be an understatement, because it gets much more non-linear than you could imagine. It is very fast-paced and condensed, almost feels like that of a Hollywood style, and I completed this in 4 days. A good thing about the narrative is that it stands true to what the book intends to deliver. That is, memories and time are some things that should not be messed with, no matter how advanced the capabilities are. Actually, from a narrative style, the writing is very deft, as it builds suspense and thrill, because for the most part, the book is more of a thriller and less of a science fiction. The story is deep-rooted in the theme of causality, and the narrative is brilliant in conveying that by means of the writing style, which is comprehensible and succinct. Going by the typical narrative structure of problem, conflict, and resolution, you can tick those off, and I am quite happy with the execution part, but not with the way they are executed, because that felt somewhat forced and abrupt. Coming to the characters, I have no problems with them when it comes to their interests, motivations, conflicts, and their place in the story. Essentially, there are three main characters, Barry Sutton and Helena Smith, whom I have already mentioned, and an antagonist named Marcus Slade. Slade gets very little space with respect to the other two, and frankly, I would have loved if he had more interactions, because it could bring out more shades to the duality of their conflicts. Of course, their character development is not deep because of the book being more of a thriller, and that is good, because with all the dumbfounding twists, it would have been really pointless. Apart from this, there is also a romantic angle involved that somehow disappointed me. Not that it was unappealing, but because it comes at a time when the plot needs a little push to continue the story. There is nothing fluidic about that part of the narrative, partly because it was never hinted at before, and we the readers are expected to take it as it is. So I thought that it was a questionable narrative choice, but definitely it serves for a good character development. Let me be brief about the setting. It is set in the contemporary world, and I think it is not that futuristic, but I cannot tell that for sure because we do not exactly explore what is outside of the characters' worlds, which I believe should have been included at least in a few lines or so, because then we would know how much progress the world has made and how it would measure against the technology that the characters are dealing with. Coming to the sci-fi elements, this is where the book disappointed me, because there is very little of sci-fi and needlessly more of a fast-paced thriller. And thus the reading experience felt partly cursory. You see, if I'm not mistaken, this concept of memory and time is a newfangled one, and thus it necessitated some discussions and elaborate narrative. Because sci-fi is something we could all relate to, unlike magic. And I am speaking only about the science part, not about some backstory or something. The technology depicted at the forefront of this book is just like a plot device and seems to have no ground on its own. Some exposition is provided with passing references which are barely sufficient, and although it resolves the plot, we don't get a fraction of an idea about how that happens. Just that it happens and that we will never get to know about it. And that is a big negative for me. But for whatever portion that sci-fi elements were present, those were really excellent, although sporadic. There are some underlying themes presented by the story, most notably about dualism or the mind-body problem. The philosophical debates around this concept is complicated to say the least, and so I'm not sure how to broach this subject, and therefore analyze the book from that aspect. Maybe I can learn more about this and make a separate video. The second theme that I have found and is more vividly embraced is the concept of humanity, and what it takes to be a human and how vulnerable and inadequate we are. It is not about being evil, but how naive and destructive we can be even when we use our resources with good intentions. The book does a great job in expressing that. So that's my review of Recursion, and now you know why I have mixed feelings about the book. It depends on what kind of sci-fi narrative that you prefer. And I am all in for a sci-fi thriller, but it should be a good mix of both, which I cannot say the same for this book. But all in all, it was not that bad, but could have been a little better when it comes to plot and exposition. So thank you for watching this video, and let me know your thoughts about this book if you have read it. Before you leave, do make sure to follow the drill. Like, comment and subscribe. See you soon.